Hello, welcome to the program. I'm In Sun-hee with our group of foreign journalists. Welcome to the show.
Nice to be back again.
It's been an eventful week here and abroad, and before we continue, I'd like to extend our deepest condolences to those in the United Kingdom where an appalling act of terrorism in Manchester took the lives of innocent people, including children. Now, it was indeed a very sad event. What were some of the other stories that caught your attention? Frank, we'll start with you.
Well, this week earlier I covered the trial beginning of South Korean President Moon Jae-in. Ironically, it's kind of been off the radar for almost 2 months. It was the biggest story for a long time during the demonstrations that brought about her impeachment and removal from office. And then when she was indicted and went sort of into prison, it kind of fell off the radar because of North Korea and because of the election, which seems kind of strange considering the former president was, in prison being detained. So now it's back, sort of the #1 story that hounds like us are covering. I was out there in front of the courthouse for the first day of her trial, and I also saw some international media out there covering it. So it's come back to be one of the top stories in the world, I think.
Right. What about you, Fred?
Yeah, same. It was a busy week. I covered the Park Geun-hye trial. French media were quite interested by it. And I just interviewed Tae Yong-ho, this famous North Korean diplomat who defected to South Korea. And that was really interesting interview to ask him about what do they think about Moon Jae-in future North Korean policy and what you can do with North Korea. So it was pretty busy.
Right. What about you, Don?
Well, the North Korean missile shot, frankly, where North Korea is going from there and what will be the response that I think is really of greater interest, at least in the U.S.
Right. Here in Korea, President Moon Jae-in's manner of interacting with those around him has been receiving much attention as he actively seeks to bridge the possible communication divide between him and the people. In this edition of Foreign Correspondents, we take a look at this new approach that some are calling refreshing and others radical. Korea's new president was sworn in on May 10th.
국민과 수시로 소통하는 대통령이 되겠습니다. 낮은 사람, 겸손한 권력이 되어 가장 강력한 나라를 만들겠습니다. 군림하고 통치하는 대통령이 아니라 대화하고 소통하는 대통령이 되겠습니다.
During his inauguration ceremony, President Moon Jae-in placed great emphasis on being open and communicating with the public, and he's been reflecting this in his actions as well. President Moon has been seen as approachable and friendly, mingling with the public when out and about, taking selfies with them and signing autographs. Even at his private residence in Yangsan, Gyeongsang-namdo province, people flocked to see the president on vacation. The Cheongwadae Secret Service gave public access to areas leading right up to the president's home. Greater access and openness is also seen in how he interacts with the media. The president said he would make announcements on major issues to the press himself.
국무총리 후보자 등 새 정부 첫 인사를 제가 직접 국민들께 말씀드리고자 합니다.
On the political front, he invited the floor leaders of the 5 major parties to the presidential office for a luncheon to open up channels of communication.
현안이 있든 없든 그냥 정례적으로 늘 만나는 이런 틀이 된다면 우리 대화나 소통에도 훨씬 도움이 될 거고 그런 모습 자체가 국민들에게 희망을 주지 않을까 그렇게 생각합니다.
귀중한 시간을 쪼개서 저희들 오찬에 초청해 주신 데 대해서 그만큼 대통령님의 협치 의지를 보여주신 것이라고 생각합니다.
President Moon Jae-in has stripped away a lot of past practices that were considered authoritarian and rigid, drawing a lot of attention to his approach on interacting with the public. Now, as we just saw in the report, there are images of President Moon which are quite different, I would say, for lack of better word. But those images, especially those caught of him with the ordinary citizens, like taking selfies, responding to calls for autographs, quite interesting. For Koreans, all this is really new. Do you share this sentiment, or do you believe this is the kind of approach that a leader of a country should adopt, Frank?
Well, I think it is refreshing and radical. I'm not sure it's the kind of approach certainly his security team would like him to adopt, getting out there. You know, it is a positive approach. We need to look at this, though, I think, as something of a honeymoon, because him coming into power with such a cloud over the leadership of South Korea, he really gets sort of a free pass, at least for the initial period of his presidency. And we'll see how he responds, especially to the press, after maybe he has some sort of greater challenges in terms of trying to pass his domestic and foreign policy and policy toward North Korea, when the press actually adopts what I feel is a more healthy approach, which is a healthy antagonistic relationship, challenging him and questioning him regarding the execution of his duties, which I think is going to take place sometime after this honeymoon is over.
Right, and staying with that honeymoon, so to speak. Fred, from what you've seen so far, what image comes to mind as indication, perhaps, of his determination to better engage the public?
I think what struck me as the most interesting was when in Gwangju, for the commemoration of the massacre, one of the victims started to cry and left the stage, and he ran after her trying to hug her. She didn't see, like some of the staff had to tell her, oh, the president is coming, and he hugged her. And that was striking because you couldn't help but remember that Park Geun-hye refused to meet the victim of Sewol for a long time. And once again, you can see the gulf between the two presidents, and that was another striking image.
And another photo that had Moon Jae-in with a butterfly that had landed on his head, because I guess they released butterflies or something at this event, and that also was circulated widely on the internet. I think really Moon Jae-in also has an opportunity with the international community. South Koreans were really worried about their reputation in the international community because of the Park Geun-hye scandal and what happened there. That could turn into an opportunity, I think, for Moon Jae-in, because that scandal did place South Korea, you know, in a preeminent position in the international community, perhaps in a negative light. But Moon Jae-in now, being a, you know, democratically elected leader, more liberal, more open to the press, he has perhaps an opportunity to take that notoriety and turn it into a positive sort of influence and a positive position for South Korea on the international stage.
I'm not sure how much people overseas are really attuned to all this. We're going to know a lot more about President Moon when he sees President Trump in Washington. And then we'll really get some, I think, some perceptions into where we're going and into this potential split between the U.S. and between President Trump and President Moon.
Right. Let's turn to security. Frank, you talked about this earlier. So President Moon Jae-in is known to engage in impromptu exchanges with people at times, and this at times provides to be a challenge for his security officials who are trying to ensure his safety. What do you think?
I think I have a very, interesting story coming from France, because exactly this question arose during our campaign we just finished. Our current president, Macron, he made some kind of a blunder with, there was a misunderstanding, he didn't participate to some event, and because of the security, because his staff told him, no, it's not safe, you couldn't go. And it turned out to be one of the most important mistakes of his campaign. And there is this video that came out after where he's blaming his staff, and what he's telling them is that you cannot listen to the security guy. If you listen to them, we are dead. I will never be safe, so I'd better do what I need to do and win this campaign. And I found that really interesting, and I think that's the right approach. You can never be safe. I mean, if you start to listen only to the security guy, then don't try to run for president, because this is maybe not the job you have to do.
We have seen some incidences in the past. We had Park Geun-hye, she got slashed. We had the American ambassador to South Korea get stabbed. So we have had some serious incidences here. I think sort of that exterior perimeter where the number of the public that gets closer to the president needs to be filtered out a little bit more, maybe a little bit more attention paid along those lines, and You know, but again, as you said, you know, that's really part of the job. You see, you know, assassination attempts and attacks on leaders, and I think that they understand that going into it.
Don, your caution about the honeymoon period has been reiterated by others who claim that the current efforts by the new president are part of a political show. This is the opinion of these a small number of people. But to a certain extent, do you not believe that a sense of showmanship is important for politicians?
Oh yes, I think that there's a symbolism here, and I think that it's important to feel that he's a real human being who's on the same wavelength in his thought processes as the people out there with whom he's communicating. He's projecting himself as a warm and understanding and decent person, which is in quite contrast to his predecessor. One of her big mistakes was that she just didn't communicate, not only with people in general, but with her own associates, her own ministers, which could all reflect her own sad background and her confined background, you know, because of the assassinations of both her parents, and the way she was brought up, you know, within the Blue House, and then in a very, very tightly constrained atmosphere. Moon Jae-in goes back many years as a man of the people. He was an activist. He was a labor lawyer. He worked with people who felt that their rights were being infringed upon. He has a long background in human rights and in concern for working people. So yes, the symbolism is important. I agree. Couldn't agree more. I hope that he manages to maintain not only the symbolism but also the actuality of warmth and understanding of common people's problems.
And I think that can be seen just talking about shoes. When Chae Soon-sil first came to trial, she dropped a Prada shoe off her foot. And then there's a recent photo of Moon Jae-in circulating of his shoes that are worn out and tattered actually on the heel. And they were made by, I think, an organization that manufactures goods by the blind, according to a report I understand. So that kind of shows the differences between the two sort of groups, I think.
Also attracting as much attention as President Moon Jae-in's efforts to engage the people are the efforts by First Lady Jong Seok to better approach the public. Fred, do you see her engaging personality as favorably affecting perhaps her husband's overall public image?
I mean, that's what I read. I read especially in the Cholado, she went there every week and she played a very important role to convince undecided voters to vote for her husband. And after he became president, she seems to want to play a role. She has this cheerful image. I don't know how she's in real life, but she seems to have this cheerful image. For the first day of his inauguration, she was not wearing hanbok, the Korean traditional dress. She was wearing a more Western dress, and some commentators said, oh, she wants to appear as more modern. So we'll see how it goes, but so far, and oh, she wants to use a bit of a cooking diplomacy as well. Like there is a meeting with different leaders from different parties, and she cooked the dessert. So I'm not too sure that fit into the modern wife framework, but still she obviously wants to play a role, and so far I think it worked well for her and her husband.
In this next report, we explore efforts by leaders around the world to engage their people and to create a constructive channel of communication. President Moon Jae-in's fresh approach toward public interaction has often been compared with that of another head of state. None other than former US President Barack Obama. During his 8 years in office, Mr. Obama was seen as breaking down walls and being a people-friendly leader. During a 2013 speech on immigration policy reforms, he was interrupted by a heckler. But instead of ignoring the incident, Mr. Obama listened to what he had to say.
I respect the passion of these young people because they feel deeply about the concerns for their family.
In 2016, while announcing executive orders on gun safety, he wiped away tears thinking of the shooting at an elementary school 3 years ago. In 2015, the Obama administration lifted a 40-year ban on White House tour photos for visitors. This open approach from Mr. Obama and his administration is seen as one of the reasons why he maintained such a high approval rating even on his way out of the office. Meanwhile, his successor, President Donald Trump, has been using Twitter as his primary means of communication with the public. President Trump has tweeted on no shortage of issues after taking office, and is said to have posted over 500 tweets during his first 100 days in the White House. But when it comes to media, the administration is seen as being uncommunicative. Back in February, Mr. Trump even banned a number of news organizations from an off-camera press briefing. Acknowledging some of his shortcomings, President Trump gave himself a C on messaging and communicating with the public. Over in France, newly elected President Emmanuel Macron is known for having built his campaign platform on public engagement. His policy priorities were formulated through in-depth interviews with 25,000 people secured by campaigners who knocked on 300,000 doors. In Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel, who has the nickname Mutti or Mother, is also seen as a leader who engages the public. Trips that she has made to grocery stores and shops to run errands have been reported multiple times. From press briefings to social media, there is a wide array of channels leaders can use to communicate with the public. Actively using those opportunities is seen as one of the best ways to understand people's needs and reflect that in state governance. Right, let's begin with former US President Barack Obama. Don, what would be a good example of his strong skills in communication, in your opinion?
Well, he was a great communicator. People really got to liking him. He was a good speaker. Well, not just speeches that he read that were crafted by a bunch of people, but a good spontaneous speaker. And his wife got along very well with people, and he's got these two daughters and so forth who were quite popular. So, he was an extraordinary person from the point of view of just his personal appeal and his ability to deal with people, to talk to people. It'd be very hard to match him, either in the US or, I don't think Trump matches him. I don't want to reveal a political prejudice there, but I don't think Trump is anywhere nearly as good a communicator as was Obama. And it'd be very hard for any leader to do that. Let's see whether President Moon and his wife are able to do that. It'll be interesting. So far, so good.
Right. Frank, Mr. Obama is also known to have uploaded funny videos of himself on YouTube. Do you think such acts, in effect, might hurt credibility or challenge authority?
Yeah, I think they do in a sense in terms of perhaps the older demographic and the elderly public, but I think it will endear himself with the younger generation. I mean, a lot of people, absorb other forms of media now. Not everybody's watching TV. It's less than, I think, 40% or something are getting their news from TV, and they're getting their media from other sources. So engaging those other sources, I think, is an imperative of a leader, especially one, from the liberal side of the fence, because more of your support is going to come from the younger generations. So I think it's appropriate to do that type of thing. At the same time, there should be, I think, some sort of, understanding that you don't want to demean the credibility and respect that should be provided the office of president.
Fred, President Donald Trump, the current president of the United States, is well known for making use of the online platform to announce his thoughts.
Yeah.
How do you respond to this manner of communication?
For me, that's amazing. The fact that, I don't say necessarily that in a good way, by the way, the fact that you have such unfiltered access directly to the mind, the thought, and the brain of the President of the United States, because he tweets whatever he thinks. There is nobody to tell him, oh, you should rephrase, you should maybe not write this. He has some crazy idea, bam, it's on Twitter. And it's a bit scary in a way. I mean, it's interesting as a journalist to have this direct access to what he thinks, but when you see what he thinks, then you become a bit scared.
What are your thoughts, Don, as an American journalist?
Well, this is the way of communications, you know. Twitter is something new, you know. And the president is using just this new avenue of communications. They didn't have that sort of thing 10, 20 years ago or 100 years ago. Forget it. Now it's available, and he's making use of it. So I think it's inevitable that as communications advances, so means of communicating by the president and others should also advance. I'm surprised that more politicians aren't also, using this means of communication. Where are they? Why only President Trump? Why not a lot of others? Maybe they will. Maybe the idea will be catching. On the other hand, that form of communications can also lead to miscommunications. He tweets something, and then later his spokesman or assistants have to explain, well, what the president really meant to say was this, they have to qualify it and go into fuller explanations and so forth. But, why not? I mean, we may see it in other countries. Why haven't we seen that in opposition or other politicians in the U.S.? Where are they? I would think they'd be doing it, but they're not yet. But, stay tuned. They may start.
Probably because his actions have not been receiving favorable response.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, some claim that the number of press briefings by a leader stands as indication of his ability to interact with the media and with his people. Do you agree, Fred?
I don't know. For me, I mean, French presidents don't give many press briefings, and so far it was not such a big deal. I don't think it should be a metrics to measure his ability to listen or to communicate. There is other ways. And another problem with if you're too close to as a journalist, you shouldn't be too close to the power, and press briefing should not be the only way to cover a presidency. So there is things that are official and that need to be said, but you need to develop as well other ways to access information, to get sources. And actually, now in France, some of the most interesting articles about politics come from articles that don't have press access to the presidency. But they have their own sources, and it turned out to be much more interesting than official journalists. So not such a big deal for me.
Fred, I have another question. I mentioned this in the report, but the current French president, Emmanuel Macron, adopted a unique way of approaching the people during his campaign. Not sure whether it's unique or whether he got the idea from somebody else, but tell us a bit more about that.
Oh, it definitely, Emmanuel Macron benchmarked what Obama did. And we saw many things in the French campaign that mirrored what Obama did. For example, he used his wife a lot. His wife played a much more prominent role, which is as I said, very unusual for French politics. They did a lot of People's Cover magazine as a couple. We are not used to see that. He was singing the Marseillaise, the French national anthem, with his hand on his chest, which is very American. We don't do that. He did like door-to-door marketing. His supporters went to visit a lot of houses directly. We don't do that as well. He did his meetings as well. It was interesting to see when he gave his public meetings, he was standing alone. He was kind of a stand-up, no notes, nobody around him, which is, again, very unusual for French politicians. And so you can see how he tried to emulate what Obama did, but anyway, he's a good communicator. And there is one video of Emmanuel Macron that became viral where he's talking to a classroom full of kids who ask him, "Oh, sir, what is the difference between left and right?" And he has like 1 minute answer, which is amazingly clear, right on point. He's a naturally good communicator, and I think that's the basics. That's what's the most important.
What was the response?
I cannot summarize it, but basically he's explained, there is like for the right, it's more like freedom is more important. For the left, it's more like equality. And his project, it was simple. It was for kids, but it was pretty right on point. Yeah.
It's quite impressive then.
Yeah.
At present, public support for Moon's administration, especially these administration's dealings of state affairs, stands at over 80%. What path should the president continue to pursue to ensure continued public support for his policies, for his government?
Well, I think he's going to have to start making some more controversial decisions, and I think it's unlikely that he's going to, maintain an 80% approval rate, given that he only got 40% of the vote. I think it's remarkable that he got to 80% so soon. The decisions that he did make, though, were ones that I think really the public really supported, particularly on the air the decision to shut down some coal power plants and to address the issue of bad air in South Korea. I think that was a really popular move. And the other things that he's done to get out in front of the people, I think were really popular. But again, you know, the honeymoon could be quite short, and he does have some controversial issues that'll have to be dealt with.
Right. The most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't being said. Now, these words by Austrian-born American management pundit Peter Drucker, whose writings also helped lay the foundation of the modern business entity, highlight a crucial yet unspoken rule of interacting with people. Now, I hope these words provide you with some food for thought this week, and hope to see you again next week.